Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Darryl and JJ Jones.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jones Zone. This is our continuing episode about folks who have moved from California to a different state, which is an enormous portion of my personal business at the moment. I realized this some time ago, 4 or 5 years ago, how many people were leaving California to go out of state. So it's funny, I was talking to my wife. My wife actually had this idea. And so I'm doing episodes for each state. Today, we had the pleasure of having Aron Klaff, a great friend of mine who moved from California to Idaho. In fact, what city in Idaho are you in, Aron?
I reside in Star, Idaho, about 19 miles outside of Boise.
Got it. So I'm going to just go through a series of questions that I think anybody who would be interested in knowing about who's considering moving from California to Idaho. I think, well, let's start with you. What prompted your leave from California to go to Idaho?
Well, Darryl, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure, you being a mentor of mine and great friend. You know, as you know, some of the story, at least, my wife and I think it was 2020, my wife and I had been talking, kind of dreaming together before that, kind of where else, you know, would we want to move if we ever moved from Southern California. And then 2020 and, you know, what we all know is the COVID era, kind of kicked in and it was really a kick to the pants kind of to us and after kind of absorbing it and everything, and we have 2 teenage boys, you know, that were in the school system there in Southern California. We just hit a point where we just felt it was time for a new beginning, Darryl. You know, between the cost of living in Southern California, which is tough, and then everything that came with it at COVID, we just frankly wanted to experience more freedom in our own decisions. And so we started thinking about and praying about some other states, which included Idaho, Tennessee, and Florida, to be frank with you.
What pushed Idaho over the edge?
I'm also a federal agent with Homeland Security Investigations, and I had the opportunity to put in for a transfer to the different states. My wife and I talked about it and made a decision to put in for those transfers. Sometimes hard to get such a transfer, but we felt really good about it and everything, and based on the work that I had done. And actually, I probably had stronger ties and connects in Florida and Tennessee, oddly enough. But in Idaho, we had one friend here that my wife, dear friend of ours, that my wife worked with in Southern California, who retired up here. She's the one who told us, hey, what about Idaho? And she's sending pictures of her new home at the time and talking to us about Idaho. And that kind of opened up the door. And, you know, I put in for transfers in all 3 places. And after some great conversations with one of the bosses with HSI up here that I worked for in Idaho, that opportunity created itself for me to transfer from Southern California up here to Idaho.
I know that Idaho has gone up in value quite a bit. It's been probably the most popular state that clients of mine have moved to. It's crazy. I've had a lot, of course, go to Texas, Nevada, Arizona. Tennessee is a big one, Florida. But Idaho's been, me personally, I don't think it's the #1 state where people are moving from California to, but it's certainly right up there, and it's certainly one for mine. And everybody's just really loved it. And I've known prices have gone up quite a bit. But let me ask you this. When you sold your house in Orange County, what were you able to obtain? What's that same house in Idaho cost?
That same house in Idaho, it depends on the city, Darryl.
You're in Star, right?
What's that?
You're
I'm
in Star.
Okay. Yeah. So the same
Star.
house in Star. Again, and we sold for, you know, roughly about $1 million as you recall. And the same house in Star went for at that time in fall of 2021 for about high 6s to about $700,000. So we're looking at a difference, and that's kind of across the board in Idaho here doing real estate, that the median price difference between Idaho and Southern California is about $300,000 or so. And in fact, Darryl, the Idaho market, as you well know, the California market from 2018 to 2021, I mean, just took off. And it's almost like the Idaho market paralleled that as Idaho got more popular. And it's, you know, it's not the best kept secret anymore. It's not a secret at all. Yeah. Just a great place to come to, as I've learned and experienced. But the Idaho market really paralleled what California was doing in that 4 or 5 year span or so.
Now, how's real estate today? It's 2023. How's real estate today? I network with a lot of agents in different states, and I hear a lot of them talking about how, well, it's taking a little bit longer to sell properties now. And, they're sitting in the market. We're not getting quite as many offers, and we're seeing a fewer more price reductions in these other states. I know California here, specifically in Orange County, we actually did see a little bit of a downfall last summer when those rates popped up. But boy, we sure had a rebound this first and second quarter here, to where we're back into a seller's market. So how's it in Idaho?
Darryl, we probably had our first simmer in the spring of 2022. We had a simmer in the market here a little bit. And as you spoke about, with rates starting to creep up there, they didn't hit where they are today or anything. And then seasonally in Idaho, when you hit the winter, it's very common to have kind of a simmer in the market. It's kind of natural.
Simmer, slow down.
A slowdown. Okay. Yeah. And that's with the weather. Those that are interested in Idaho from out of state, like I often tell them best I can, try and avoid that from the third week in November to about the end of March, because that's a really hard time just with the roads, and you're getting some snows, a trickle here and there, and it's it's a little unpredictable as far as trying to make a move from out of state. So a lot of the out of staters kind of avoid that period of time. So with the winter simmer and then coming to this spring, Darryl, and the summer where we stand now, you hit the nail on the head. Days on market, certainly longer. It's taken homes longer to sell. Our inventory between now and this time last year, Ada County, the most populous county in Idaho, Ada County inventory is down about 35% from last year. And then Canyon County, also here in the Treasure Valley, that's down about 40% of inventory. So it's been a tough market. We're still in that seller's market zone because of that low inventory. Demand is still fairly high. But again, that's what we're seeing here in the Treasure Valley in Idaho.
I want to let our listeners know a little bit more about specifically where you are in Idaho, because Idaho is obviously a big state. I mean, it borders Canada, right. And I'm looking here. You're next to Wyoming, in between Montana and Nevada, just north of Oregon, Utah. Washington. Yeah, next to Oregon and Washington. You're more near the southern border, or the south side of Idaho, let's say.
That's correct. That's correct.
And then you've got Star, Eagle, Meridian. I know there's some popular cities that other clients have moved to as well. Tell us a little bit more about your region.
Yeah. And then, Darryl, you were definitely going in the right direction. That includes Star, Eagle, Meridian, Boise, as everyone knows and thinks of kind of Boise and Meridian, because those are bigger in population. Also includes Nampa and Caldwell and Middleton, which are in Canyon County, technically, but still part of the Treasure Valley here, and still, a lot of upside to look into those areas. And one thing about the Treasure Valley is every city is a little bit different. So it's really important to talk to those California buyers and educate them on the differences in those cities. And then when they make a trip out here, it really helps if they know a little bit ahead of time, and someone like me knows what their housing goals are as well.
I had actually sent you a client that was extraordinarily impressed with you. They said that you had toured them multiple cities, and you had a tremendous amount of knowledge about the different areas, differences between those areas, etc. So we'll get your information towards the end of the podcast. So whenever listeners that want to talk to you can call you and ask you more specific questions. So let's delve into another topic. Let's talk about weather. That's always a concern for people moving from the best weather in the world, California, to other states, wondering how the heck they are. So tell me a little bit more about that adjustment you had to make for weather, and if it was a big adjustment or what.
Excellent question, Darryl. And we landed here right at the end of the fall, going into the winter. That first winter, I always like to warn those coming from the warm states. The first winter, it is a challenge. I'm not going to say it's not, but getting through that first winter, you learn how to layer up. You learn that those what you think are good sweatshirts in California, that cold's going to bite right through. So, but you get up here and you know where to shop, and your Costco's and your Carhartts and different places, and you certainly get squared away fast when you talk to Idahoans about the things you need: gloves, beanies, hats, that sort of thing, these thicker jackets, scarves, and you keep those accessible and ready to go for everyone in the house, in a family.
What would be the average, let's say the temperature when it's during the winter time? Are we talking about 0 degrees? Are we talking about 30 degrees?
The lowest I've experienced out here in the last couple of winters has been 0 degrees. I was taking down Christmas lights in 0 degrees. Wasn't cold. I was layered up and no problem in doing so. I was playing some music, having a great time. That sounds awfully cold, but let me tell you, the difference about here in the Treasure Valley is the wind. And even though we do get some winds here, we get some windy days. As you go eastbound into like Idaho Falls, even towards Twin Falls, and then continue on up to Idaho Falls, get closer north to Montana, or head north towards Coeur d'Alene, you get colder temperatures, you get greater winds. But here in the Treasure Valley, the way the weather sinks in, if you will, and everything, and the altitude is concerned, though you get colder weather, you don't get the heavy winds coming with it. So it's 42 years, I'm a warm weather state guy, Darryl, you know that. And coming here, first winter was an adjustment. I never said, oh my gosh, I wish we still live in California, with all that you get out here and all the benefits and amenities that I'm sure we'll talk about. But
yeah, in fact, let's so 0 degrees, but on average, the winter is 20 degrees for 3 months.
It is. On average, you're floating in that 20 to 30 degree range pretty often. Low 30s in the wintertime. So worst case scenario, might get down to 0. Usually you're floating in that 30 degree range.
Okay. And then hot days. What's your hottest day? Is it August, your hottest month there? August, September?
Yeah. We're actually in the midst of a heat wave now where we're experiencing, low hundreds some of the days this week. So I'd say late July through August, yeah, you're going to be in the 90 and then the low hundreds. And Darryl, it's a drier heat, kind of like that of a desert. So it's not, you don't have a humidity factor really. Typically, we're kind of low to mid humidity.
That's a big deal.
Something to consider.
That's a very big deal. I've been in hot weather where it's high humidity and hot weather where it's not high humidity, and there's an enormous difference.
Well, I just came back from Puerto Vallarta from a long planned family vacation, and coming back from 88 degrees and humid, coming into this, and I was outside in 100-degree southern Idaho weather, and I was like, wow, this is better than 88 in Vallarta with humidity through the roof.
Tell me more about, how about the schools? How are the schools? What have you found to be about the schools?
Good schools throughout Ada County, really good schools. The schools generally speaking, in Ada County are a little better than Canyon County, though I know plenty of people in Canyon County that are experiencing good results and they're happy with the schools there.
How about the cost of living? Have you noticed a difference in price of gas, insurance, registration, groceries? How's that look in Idaho?
Oh, Darryl, it's much less. And, we got here, I think our electric bill is probably about a quarter of what it was in Southern California. Wow. Gas bill's a little bit less. Water is, I'll give you an example. Living in Star, our water bill is fixed, $61.80 every month. And my water bill was, with 2 teenagers singing in the shower, trying to pull them out after a half an hour to conserve water. Our water bill was going through the roof, upwards of $300. So getting here, paying that water bill, much more cost efficient in Idaho. DMV fees. You could register your vehicle for 2 years. That costs us less to register for 2 years than it did 1 year in California. So something to consider. Property taxes are a little bit less. Ada County being at 0.74% of the cost of a home or the assessed value of a home, whereas in Canyon County, I think it's a little bit higher at 0.88% of the cost of the home or assessed value. And then also we have a first-time buyers for Idaho homeowners exemption of up to $125,000 off of the price you paid for a home. Your property taxes are based on that. So you start to figure in all of those things and the cost of living, and obviously less of a 6% sales tax, less than that of California and those sorts of things. Idaho is really affordable, especially when you're coming from a state like California with California monies and equity in your home and that sort of thing.
And just to put it in perspective, our taxes here for property taxes is right around 1.1%. So you're much less than here in California. And have you noticed a lot of Californians coming over to Idaho?
Oh boy, I have, Darryl. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Gosh, in the last 5 years, Californians have been 46% of the migration of out-of-staters to Idaho have been Californians, Darryl. And in those peak years, 2020 and 2021, upwards of 27,000 Californians each year that came from California to Idaho. The only state even close for those migrating to Idaho, Washington, about 20,000 people coming over from Washington to Idaho. But yeah, several Californians
What has
considering a
been
move or making that move to Idaho.
Has there been a continuing theme? I know that most of the people that I have moving out of state, I can name my reasons that I hear. Oftentimes grandkids. I mean, boy, the gravitational pull of grandkids is so great. So they either have grandkids there or the cost of living, culture, just way of life, as well as home prices, etc. So what have you noticed? You talked to a lot of the Californians. Have they expressed why they did go to Idaho?
Yeah, for all those things you mentioned, Darryl, and also, and I'm saying this in a very general sense, but freedom to choose, freedom as far as being involved in your kids and kind of what they're getting in at school and that sort of thing. Personal freedoms. You'll talk to a lot of people here in Idaho, and especially we moved to Star. And it seems like Star and Middleton next door in Canyon County, but right next door, 15 minutes away down Highway 44. You seem like those two cities, everyone you talk to, they'll always tell you they're political refugees, Darryl. And that's a term that gets thrown around here a lot, where they just didn't like, I'll call it, the policies that were taking place in California and how that kind of infringed on their freedoms. They came to Idaho for a better life. And you hear that a lot with Californians moving to Idaho.
I have to admit, everybody that I had moved to Idaho, and I've spoken to all of them afterwards, and they all have no regrets. None of them have any regrets.
No regrets, Darryl. No regrets. And I'll tell you, along with I guess I'd call it the freedom aspect, the people and the culture are just incredible here. I mean, and forgive me if I told you this story, but I think it's beneficial to listeners. When I came out here to house hunt, one of the first open houses I went to, kind of an older gal who was looking at the same house, looking to downsize. We got into a conversation. That's another thing. Here in Southern Idaho, Darryl, everywhere you go, I describe it like this: you could make a new best friend. So I'm talking to this gal in an open house. I'm telling her our story. She's telling me hers. And she was looking to downsize from a large kind of ranch style house into this home in a neighborhood and that sort of thing. Kids were out. She didn't need all this land and that sort of thing. So tell her my story. And after 10 minutes, she tells me, well, honey, you just look. If you don't find a house in this trip, here's my number. You give me a call. You stay with us. I cook well. Got plenty of space. I got all these rooms I don't know what to do with. And I turned to her and I said, I'm from California. You don't know if I'm a serial killer. You're inviting me in your home. And she laughed, and she said, well, we got plenty of guns, my dear, and I think we're going to be okay. And that's an Idahoan for you. And even after we got into escrow and I kind of did 3 moving trips up here, I go to Star Country Cafe. Me and my son go to take out to breakfast, the only people we knew at that point in Idaho. And some former Marine, I never even saw him, he paid for our bill, put a Bible verse on the bill and said the price is already paid, and walked out. I never even got a chance to thank him. I go to get the bill. I was taking people out to breakfast and bill's paid. The next day, Darryl, I get in line at Dutch Brothers Coffee. I go to get in line for coffee. The person in front of me paid for my coffee. This is just the next day from someone paying for my breakfast. And it's just the heart of Idahoans here. The people and the culture are amazing. And if you invest in people, they will invest in you. And that's one reason I'm here.
Well, I tell you, I think we could get an enormous number of people if you can find people that will pay their mortgage. Do you have anybody that? So tell me more about
that yet.
You have two beautiful children, two boys, man. And I remember being a boy, man. I needed a lot of stuff to do. I luckily grew up next to a field, and so we had BB guns and just plenty to do. Tell me more about what activities there are in Idaho for people.
Oh my gosh, you might have to cut me loose for an hour here. I'll just sum it up like this: the great outdoors, Darryl. Oh my goodness, the biking, the hiking, the rivers, the lakes. Everyone's got their spot or spots along water somewhere. There's tons of water in Idaho. Californians, you got your governor telling you you're out of water. There's tons of water in Idaho. There's plenty of water. There's a surplus of water. There's just great spots just to hang out with family, hang out with friends, and enjoy. It seems like about every hour and a half to 3 hours, there's different spots that people do tons of camping. The springtime hits after winter. You see all the outdoor toys coming out, all the quads and jet skis and boats and you name it, and trailers, and everyone hits the road to hit their spots with family and friends. A lot of fishing, hunting is some of the best in the country, and people take part in that and they absolutely love it. There's so much to do here. I mean, the weekend hits and just Friday, you just see people just getting out and to enjoy what I like to call the great outdoors here. It's a wonderful, wonderful life. And in California, you remember how we were as a family in California, Darryl, and we were beach bums. We went to the beach probably 30 to 40 times a year, more than most families. We were really, really into the beach. That was our thing. And I was afraid I would miss the beach. And I miss it a little bit, but for what we've gotten here with just the rivers and the lakes and community and hangout spots, to me, has just exceeded my expectations. So you like the great outdoors, you are not going to be bored in Idaho, my friends.
Wow. You may have talked a little bit about this, but what other challenges do you think Californians would have going to Idaho? You talked about the weather. I suppose possibly finding a house, because I know of bidding wars. And do you have any advice for potential challenges for Californians to look out for when moving to Idaho?
Yeah, and that has changed in this current market. Like I talked about, kind of that 2018 to 2021. Yeah, the bidding wars. And, if you were trying to come in as a contingent buyer, one that needed to sell their home in California in order to buy in Idaho, you didn't have a chance. You had to look at other means or pull an equity line or whatnot. You were jumping into situations with multiple offers and going at and far above asking. But now in this current market, in this simmer and interest rates, as you know, getting to the high sixes and low sevens, there's not that type of competition in most price ranges. We still have that in that kind of first time buyer, $300,000 to $400,000 range, just intense competition. Tough to get a home in that price range with the low inventory with all these first time buyers. In most price ranges, you got a little time to make your decisions. It depends how the sellers and the listing agents agree on listing a home to sell. But typically, if they list it at market value, you got a little bit of time. You're not fighting with 5, 10, 20 other buyers. So that's no longer a challenge in the state of this current market. I talked about the weather in those winter months. That's something to think about. That's obviously a challenge when you're trying to move a family and you're trying to time it with what could be a little snow dump here and there. But other than that, Darryl, I really can't. I racked my brain thinking about this one because contact and clients were actually in town not too long ago, and they asked me about those challenges or things to be prepared for. And apart from the weather, I really can't come up with one. So the challenges are minimal, and certainly at this time in the state of this market.
So, Aron, tell me, what prompted you to become a realtor? Because you didn't sell real estate here in California. Obviously, you lived here, but when you got there, you started selling real estate, which I thought was fantastic. So tell me more about how that looked. What caused that?
Good question, Darryl. On the California side, and you remember, I came to a lot of your open houses, especially those in my own neighborhood. I was kind of a real estate geek, and you were the real estate genius, and I love to go in and gauge value. And I always had a lot of questions for you and even some follow-up text messages. And you were just so welcoming, even when I wasn't buying or selling a house. What made you stand apart from others is the organic relationship that was built out of just going to Darryl Jones open houses and talking market and talking real estate with you. And I'm sure I shared with you that I've always wanted to be Darryl Jones, but I'm busy running around doing criminal investigations. Then upon coming to Idaho and, what we call the land of the free, and my federal job was at risk with the federal vaccine mandate. Not to get into the politics of it, but my own doctor looked at my own medical situation. He didn't think this was right for me to get this vaccine. And so I was getting up to 3 emails a week from my employer threatening that I was going to be fired. And I thought, gosh, how am I going to, here I got this transfer from SoCal to Idaho. and glad we're here. And oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job. What do I do? And the first thing that came to mind, and of all my 10 to 15 years of dreaming of being a realtor, just not having the time to do it between doing investigations and coaching kids, I hit a point, hey, my kids don't need me to coach them anymore, and I'll become a realtor. And I could tap into Darryl Jones for some help along the way, along with my team and team leaders here, and started doing real estate. And through referrals and whatnot, I slowly started helping a lot of Californians. And let me go back and say, a year and a half time period through Feds for Medical Freedom, my job was restored in federal law enforcement. But then I ended up doing real estate, and that snowballed into helping a lot of Californians coming to Idaho, having lived that out myself. No one comes to Idaho, Darryl, and thinks I want to work, 70 hours a week. But now I wear two hats, and I work about 60 to 70 hours a week, and I get to be like Darryl Jones a little bit.
Oh, yikes. Well, you got to raise that bar. We're probably running out. Friend. Well, thank you. You're very kind. We'll probably wrap this up now. Tell me some fun facts that maybe only Idahoans know for our listeners.
Oh boy. And I'm not sure all Idahoans would know these things, certainly not all of them, but some of them. One interesting fact is the U.S. Forest Service owns 38% of the land in Idaho. Idaho has more miles in rivers than any other state, over 3,100 miles in rivers. Okay?
Wow.
So the history of Southern Idaho, as I've referred to it as the Treasure Valley, which Californians might not be familiar with, that's a term that goes back to 1959, because before that it was called the Lower Snake River Valley, but was changed to the Treasure Valley because of the treasure chest of resources and opportunities here in what became the Treasure Valley. And the Treasure Valley originally stretched into parts of Oregon, but I guess that changed over the years. So another fun fact for you. Another one here, the top 3 industries in Idaho are manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. And tourism largely because of the fish and game. And the number 1 agricultural product in Idaho, Californians, is beef. It is not potatoes. I should have asked you. I should have quizzed you. So everyone thinks of Idaho potatoes. I have Californians telling me, how are those potatoes? And I can't even tell you the last time I ate potatoes, but they're here if you want them. We send them to lots of other states, but number 1 agricultural product in Idaho is beef. Oh, these are some fun ones here, Darryl. The movie Dante's Peak with Pierce Brosnan took place in Wallace, Idaho. Even more current, Napoleon Dynamite, for all you youngsters out there, took place in Preston, Idaho. And in 2004, a publicity stunt claimed that Idaho was the center of the universe, apparently.
Interesting.
So I don't think that lasted very long. But
I thought it was
little fun fact
me.
For you. Besides you.
Just kidding. Yeah,
besides
no,
you.
that was
center realtor of the universe, Darryl Jones, but center place might be Idaho. The state of Idaho seal was designed in 1890 by a woman named Emma Edwards Green, the only state in a whole country with a seal that was designed by a woman. Interesting.
Very inclusive in Idaho.
Yeah. Abraham Lincoln came to Idaho when it was a territory before it became a state. This is a fun one, having done some vacationing around Payette Lake. And remind me, I'll tell you more about vacation spots if you'd like me to. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, if you have a couple, name your top 2 vacation spots.
Oh my gosh. So far, McCall, which is a lot of Idahoans call McCall Baby Tahoe. So if you think about all the benefits and riches in going to Lake Tahoe on a much smaller scale, you've got McCall, Idaho. And on the way, not too far from McCall, Lake Cascade has an amazing resort called Tamarack Resort that we love for skiing, snowboarding, mountain biking, hiking. So much to do there, and you got a wonderful lake there as well. Sun Valley and get up into the Stanley area. Redfish Lodge is really a well-known, just gorgeous. You would think it's a picture of heaven, being on Redfish Lake. And the lodge there, Darryl, is just absolutely beautiful. And that's a big spot. That's a spot, if you don't book it when it opens, which is 1 year before season, if you don't book it right away, you will not get more than a night in the lodge there. So that gets booked right away.
It's funny. I just thought of this one because I have had a lot of clients want to know this. How's the access back to California? Because a lot of Californians are going to be leaving some friends and families and They would oftentimes like to have it easily accessible. So how's the drive to the airport? What airport would we use to get to your area, by the way? Is it Boise?
You'd use Boise Airport. It's a very small airport, easy in, easy out. It'll be the easiest traveling you've done through Boise Airport. It's actually wonderful getting in and out of Boise. But we do have some of those carriers that fly direct Boise to Burbank, or you can get into LAX or Orange County that way.
Okay, so Orange County does have a flight out of John Wayne to Idaho, best
Yeah.
your knowledge. And what's the length of flight?
You're looking at about 2.5 hours.
Oh, that's
Two
not
and a half
bad.
hours. No, not bad at all.
And then driving, what would the drive look like? What's that, 15 hours?
Drives about 15 hours,
Okay.
Darryl, depending on which route you take. And let me tell, oh my gosh, I lived this. First time I drove, and I drove 3 trips during our move, kind of a big move, but there was 2 before that where I came up, left a vehicle, and flew back. I just went in my phone and what's the closest way from California to Idaho? Californians, please don't do that, especially if you're coming from Southern California, because I ended up on some of these roads where I didn't see a car for 2 hours, no cell phone service, no nothing. If I would have broke down, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. So it's by far the best route to take. Go like you're going to Las Vegas, Southern Californians, and stay on that 15 freeway. Go through Utah. You'll love the views as you're going through St. George. Beautiful. Go through Salt Lake. If you've got to do an overnighter, I think we did in Farmington, right by Salt Lake, and then continue that drive, but about 15 hours, take 15 the whole way, and then up to 84 and head into Idaho, head into Boise on 84 West.
How far are you from the airport? A 15-minute drive, a half-hour drive,
From
2 hours?
Star, I'm about 30 minutes from the airport.
Okay.
Okay. And that's another thing that brings up a great point that in the Treasure Valley, when Californians get here like myself, and hey, where do you go for this? Or how far is this? Everything is 20 to 30 minutes away, it seems. So you've got these towns that are, a little bit of a drive on a little highway, or 1 laner each way in between the towns, but everything seems to be 20 to 30 minutes away. It really is. Now, we do have traffic. Californians don't run the other way. Okay. What is traffic in California, I call mild congestion in Idaho. It's not California traffic. We have nowhere near the loads of people in California. But with all the Californians and those from Washington and Oregon that are coming to Idaho, the infrastructure was never built to be receiving these tens of thousands of people from other places. So they're always, springtime comes, winter's done, you see those construction workers out there and they're trying to add lanes and so on and so forth. But really, there's only one freeway. And then it's all streets and highways from there, 1 lane or 2 lane highways. So 1 freeway and it's 84. When you come from California, if you say the 84 freeway, they're going to know you're from California. And that's a fact. You get rid of that word the. It is 84. Take 84 east, take 84 west. You do say take the connector, which is Highway 184 as you get into Boise and it kind of goes into downtown. So Californians, get rid of the word the.
It's funny you should say that. My uncle moved to Oregon 40 years ago. And it was funny. He said, yeah, he was told to take his California plates off of his car as soon as possible because they were not
Amen.
too thrilled about Californians moving. And apparently, from what I gathered, the primary reason, and maybe you can even touch on this, was the fact that we were raising the darn real estate prices too much that their kid who grew up in Oregon could no longer afford to buy a house because we drove up the prices. How have the fellow Idahoans, how's that been? Any problems there?
The minority and the vast minority of people, this has happened very seldom, Darryl. I can count on one hand probably, that have made a statement like that to where, oh, those Californians have jacked up the prices here. Because yes, it is the demand of out-of-staters coming to Idaho, but it's also, and trust me, being in real estate, I know, it's also the builders here. As you well know, price is determined by supply and demand. So there's a high demand here, but also, outside of the state, demand is high. When there's enough supply, you got a great thriving market. So it's not just those coming from out of town that come from places like California with more money or more equity. It's also the builders here that have driven the price up. And Darryl, I've never got blamed I'll tell you one funny story, and I'm going to have to go back and tell this person I told this story because he geeks out every time I do. I was here on one of my moving trips and getting some T-shirts because we're avid mountain bikers. Mountain biking's amazing here in Southern Idaho. And I'm getting some T-shirts. He saw my ID as I pulled out my credit card, and he looked and he said, "You from California?" And I said, yeah, I am. We're going to be moving here. We're mountain bikers. Can't wait to come to your shop some more. And he's in California. We don't need your kind of people coming here anymore. And he turned around and kind of looked me up and down. And this kid I'm a fitness guy, as you know. And so,
Sure.
I'm bigger in stature than him. I was taller and wider shoulders and that sort of thing. And this, I'll call him a lean kid, tells me that. And then he says, "We don't need your kind of people coming here. We like our guns." And I leaned in because he leaned in. And I said, "And we like our freedom." And I said, "I think you and I are going to be just fine." And then he just busted out laughing. Like this whole thing was an act that he was giving me a hard time.
Right. Right.
And when I told him, like, "Hey, I told that story to a client, about the Idaho and giving me a hard time coming from Cal," he lights up, this kid working in a bike shop. But he's really the only one that ever appeared to give me a hard time.
Right.
And now we're friends to this day. So, but really, Californians, it's a non-issue. 80%, 90% of the people you meet here, many of them are from California
I was
or
going to say,
Washington or Oregon. So we all got here at different time, and we all know what drove us here. And you'll be received in open arms. We have a term, keep Idaho, Idaho, as far as those policies I hinted out in California, some minutes back in one of the other questions, like we keep Idaho, Idaho. Are you here to keep Idaho, Idaho? All right, come on in. The community experience that you'll have will be life-changing.
It's funny. I meant to bring this up a little bit earlier in the conversation, but you had mentioned the entry-level market being what it is, really tight and everything, and you threw out 300,000 to 400,000. So I wanted to give our listeners a little perspective. So 300,000 and 400,000 for your entry level in Idaho. I think probably here in Orange County, that entry level now, I would be saying between 700 and 900, depending on condo or house. So it's still pretty darn affordable, number one. And number two, tell me more a little bit, and we'll probably end this with this. Tell me a little bit more about, for example, the type of housing you get. So are there condominiums? Do you have a lot of condominiums there in Idaho?
Yeah, there's condos and townhomes.
You have a pretty large array of different type of housing. For example, they wanted a 20-acre farm into Orange County. No such luck. But in Idaho, one could get a 20-acre farm.
Correct. And that's one thing, a big selling point here in Idaho is that there are areas, kind of hidden gem areas like Emmett, Idaho, for instance, maybe even Kuna. And these aren't big secrets to Idahoans, but you could get some land in those areas. And even though those areas have gone up as the market's gone up, those are still kind of hidden gem, along with Middleton, areas where you can get some land to build on. Or get a home with a wider lot and land. And obviously, Darryl, homes that have, no side neighbors or no back neighbors, just a view of these beautiful fields or the Boise foothills or something like that. Those are more desirable, and those are always there's going to be more competition for homes with, an open yard or living on water. We've got a beautiful little creek in the back, and never thought I'd be out here living on water. And I stare at that creek, and it's my serenity. So you've got these options. Obviously, condos, townhomes, you find more of that in like Meridian and Boise. You don't find as much like apartments, condos, townhomes. Not saying they don't exist, but there's less of them in those quaint areas like Eagle, which has been called kind of the Orange County of Idaho, Star, where I live, Middleton, and areas like that, Kuna, Nampa. You've got these, Darryl, these wide open spaces because you've got kind of a mix of farmland and developed housing and whatnot. So whatever area direction you go outside of Boise, and even Meridian still has wide open spaces and lush neighborhoods, homes being a little more spaced out. So there's different options here in Idaho, and that's what makes it so important for Californians to learn the difference in these cities and what best meets their housing needs.
Well, I tell you, the clients of mine you had helped out and were so impressed with you. I think I touched a little bit about this at the intro. Anybody who's thinking about moving to Idaho, I know that you were just an absolute wealth of knowledge for them. And so how can anybody that wants to pick your brain contact you? What's the best way to reach you?
Great question, Darryl. My phone number, I'm going to answer as long as it's not 11 o'clock at night. And I mean that to about 5 in the morning. I do sleep despite the two hats that I wear. I'm best by phone or text message. I love to talk Idaho. Any questions anyone has, I'd love to be a blessing and help come alongside.
And what's your cell number? Give us your cell number.
My cell number is 208-841-7104. 208-841-7104.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you, based on experience, Aron knows Idaho extraordinarily well. And again, this is based on clients that I've sent his direction, and they were really, really impressed. So if any of you who are considering Idaho, I know that you will not be disappointed reaching out to Aron. He's going to be able to answer a lot of questions that maybe we didn't cover in this podcast. And then, it's funny, I have one last question. That should have been my sign off right there, because it was such a natural way to do it. But for those that, for example, let's say they don't necessarily love the farm living and they want to be in a city. How far are you from the city of Boise?
25 to 30 minutes from Boise.
And how?
Right? Like I said, that answer, 20 to 30 minutes is the common answer when you talk about where to go. And I live in a neighborhood, in a development. I'm not in this farmland out in the middle of nowhere. So even though Star is more quaint, you've got those options, be in a neighborhood, be in a community, or be a little more spread out if you want. For those in Southern California that, hey, you like to get out and, you don't mind being on a busy street and be close to shopping and be in an area that I guess it's similar to California, but with the Idaho benefits, most people look to Meridian and Boise. Those are the two better known cities and populous cities. You got more to do. You got more going on there. So if you don't mind being 20 to 30 minutes out, your Star, your Middleton, your Nampa, your Cuna, that sort of thing. Everything's fairly close together. It's just a matter of what your goals and needs are.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and hopefully our listeners have found this helpful. And I can, again, highly recommend Aron if you guys have any questions worth considering Idaho. So, hey, I want to really appreciate Aron joining us. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. I can tell you, Aron knows so much about Idaho. You've got to call him if you're considering moving to Idaho, because he will be able to tell you everything you need to know. So again, thank you for listening. Aron, thank you for you. Please tell the family I said
hi. Thank you, Darryl. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, you're too kind. And I will definitely be talking to you. And we talk every few weeks, too, just about real estate and everything like that. So I'll be talking to you later, and I'm going to go ahead and be signing off right now. And thank you, listeners, for watching and listening. And I hope you find this useful. Another edition of the Jones Zone. All right, Aron, take care.
All right. Thanks, Darryl. Talk to you soon.